details do you have on this particular piece of breaking news?
Well, we know that this person, Tamba, who was also responsible for the killing of Sarabjit Singh in Pakistan's Kot Lakhpat jail, and on the charges of killing, he was also served. He also served some years of punishment, but then he was later bailed out, and he was roaming scot free. And since for a very long time, he has been a criminal, and he had a criminal background. The interest.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. A day after Iran fired some 300 missiles and drones on Israel, the world is urging restraint. Israel's war cabinet is talking retaliation. The question is, can Netanyahu do it alone? If his Western allies do not support him, can he still attack Iran? Does he have the military and financial capability to deal with the consequences? Also, why did Arab states help defend Israel against Iran? And how militarized is this region? Which countries have military assets in West Asia, troops, warships and bases? And how many of them? Tonight we'll tell you about all of it and why this is a potentially explosive zone. Also discussing the war that the world has forgotten about. 1 year of the Sudan war with the highest number of people displaced. But who cares? In India, the ruling BJP has released its election promises. What stands out and what is the response? In Singapore, the end of an era. Prime Minister Lee is stepping down next month. In the UK, people have taken the MI5 to court over intelligence failure. Can you do that in your country? Why African runners helped a Chinese competitor win a marathon. Why the Global Times is targeting Tesla for its India plans. And what is sad leave? Do you need it? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Another stabbing incident in Sydney, the second one in 3 days. The latest attack took place during a church service in the western part of the city. At least 4 people were injured. The suspect has been arrested. On Saturday, a knife rampage at a shopping mall killed 6 people. The Philippines rules out giving the US access to more military bases. The decision comes days after a trilateral summit between the US, Japan and the Philippines. In bases in the Philippines, Washington wants to strengthen its alliance with Manila to counter China. In India, no relief for jailed Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. The Supreme Court refuses an early hearing in the case. The next hearing will be on the 29th of April, which means Chief Minister Kejriwal will remain in jail when the general election begins. He was arrested by the Enforcement Directorate on the 21st of March. Azerbaijan and Armenia face off at the top court of the United Nations. Baku accuses Yerevan of waging a media campaign against it. The legal clash comes amid heightened tensions between the neighbors over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. Donald Trump's hush money trial begins in New York. He is the first former American president ever to be criminally prosecuted. Trump is accused of falsifying business records to cover up an alleged sexual encounter. This comes just months ahead of the presidential election. Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee. And Samsung beats Apple to become the world's biggest smartphone brand. In the first quarter of 2024, iPhone sales dropped drastically. It was Apple's biggest drop in sales since COVID-19 lockdowns. Last year, Apple had overtaken Samsung to emerge on top. Nervous and worried. That's West Asia right now. It's been almost 48 hours since Iran attacked Israel, but so far, Israel has not responded, mostly thanks to global pressure. We've seen different statements from different camps. The West has criticized Iran, China and Russia have criticized Israel, and the Arab states did not criticize anyone. But all these statements had one thing in common. They all urged restraint. And we saw more of that at the United Nations. Israel had called for a Security Council meeting. They tried to rally opinion against Iran, but most UNSC members had the same message to give. You must de-escalate.
Our goal is to de-escalate and then get back to the issue at hand, securing an end to the conflict in Gaza by getting a ceasefire in Gaza through a hostage deal.
We urge the West and Jerusalem to follow suit and reject the practice of provocative use of force in the Middle East, as they are fraught with extremely dangerous risks and consequences for the whole region.
China calls on the parties concerned to show maximum calm and restraint and resolve their differences and disputes in accordance with the purposes of the UN Charter.
So the red lines are clear. No one wants Israel to retaliate, not its allies in the West, not the Arab states, and not Russia, China, or India. If they want to do it, they must do it alone. Which raises the most important question. Is Israel capable of such an operation? Can they ignore global sentiment and attack alone? Iran is hoping it won't come to that. Their ambassador said so at the United Nations Security Council. He said the operation was designed to limit the scope for escalation. But Israel is not buying it. Their ambassador said Iran crossed a red line, so they have the right to retaliate.
You are wrong. This attack crossed every red line, and Israel reserves the legal right to retaliate. We are not a frog in boiling water. We are a nation of lions.
It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm.
But again, can Israel do it alone? They have carried out operations inside Iran, like cyber attacks to cripple their nuclear program and assassinations of Iranian scientists. But those attacks were different. A, because the West supported them, and B, because it was a shadow war. So Israel could turn around and say, not us. But an open military attack is a different ballgame altogether. It's a scenario Israel has often prepared for. In June last year, for example, they carried out a 2-week military drill. The focus was on Iran, on how to fight a multi-front war against them. So Israel does have the planning and the resources. But are they ready for what could come next? Like a full-blown war with Iran, are they ready for that? Usually such solo operations require 4 things or 4 conditions. Number 1, your economy must be able to take the hit. But Israel's economy is struggling. Their GDP shrank in the last 3 months of 2023, that is last year, the last 3 months of last year. It shrank by how much? Almost 5%. Their exports have also been affected. In 2023, Israeli exports were worth $156 billion, which is 6% down compared to 2022. So can Israel bankroll a long multi-front war? With US support, yes, they can. But without it, maybe not. The second condition is political support. Do you have the backing of a coalition? Do you have allies on your side? Again, in this case, the answer is no. The US and the UK have refused to support a counter-strike. They have lots of assets in West Asia. But if war breaks out, these assets could become targets. So military aid may continue, but direct support is not 100% certain. Now we come to condition number 3. Military superiority. Iran has more soldiers, warships, and natural resources. Yes, Israel's army is more advanced, but Iran fights unconventionally. You can expect their proxies to open multiple fronts. So the point is, victory is not certain. And finally, condition number 4, domestic support. And that's not a problem for Iran. Saturday's attack has rallied the public there. We've seen celebrations and fireworks in Tehran, so Iranians are ready for it. Look at this message posted by the Ayatollah. It's a video of Iranian drones over the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And look at the caption, Jerusalem will soon be in Muslim hands. So fighting Israel is a popular policy in Iran, and even if it wasn't, people can't do very much there because Iran's supreme leader has an iron grip over the country. But Israel's situation is different. Prime Minister Netanyahu is already unpopular. Most Israelis think that he is mishandling the war in Gaza, so will they trust him to lead another war? It's among the many questions facing Netanyahu. Of course, Israel can just ignore all of this like the Americans did in Iraq or like the Russians are doing in Ukraine. But remember, Israel is not Russia or the US. They may not be able to sustain a war without support. And don't forget the tactical issues. Iran and Israel are separated by other countries like Syria, Iraq and Jordan. So how would Israeli missiles even reach Iran? There are Russian assets in Syria, Iranian proxies in Iraq, and Jordan is not exactly happy with Israel's war in Gaza, so any of them could shoot down Israel's missiles. Some experts think the sea could be an option. Israel has around 5 submarines. They can fire cruise missiles from the Indian Ocean. It does eliminate the issue of airspace, but still one problem remains. Iran's navy is far superior to Israel. So my point here is quite simple. There are no easy options. Israel could use jets and missiles to target Iranian sites. They're also capable of doing it all alone. But they may not be ready for what happens next. A multi-front war, global isolation, and pushback from allies. So right now things could go either way, and this has West Asia on edge. Remember, we're talking about one of the most militarized regions in the world, not just because of what the regional players have, but also because what global powers have deployed. There's a large number of troops and military assets, from guns to long-range missiles, warships and combat aircraft, and these are all active assets. For example, when Iran fired drones and missiles, 3 Western nations swung into action to defend Israel. These are all permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and all with significant forces in the region. Of course, the US has the biggest presence. Before the current tensions exploded, American forces were present in at least 10 West Asian countries. The US was present in 10 countries at least. Out of these, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar and the UAE host the biggest American military bases and the largest contingent of US troops. According to some estimates, the US has more than 45,000 troops and more than 20 bases in the region. The exact numbers have not been disclosed. America never does that. But even by the most conservative estimates, the US presence is quite significant. Which brings us to the UK. They have around 2,500 troops and 23 military bases in the region. The Brits are present in countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Jordan. What about France? France has been a key player in the region for many decades. As of 2022, there were about 2,000 French soldiers in the region. Now, if you add all of this, you get some 50,000 soldiers. The US, the UK and France alone have at least 50,000 troops in West Asia, and they sent even more when Iran threatened to attack Israel. Those additional deployments are yet to be recalled, and the US has confirmed this.
He pre-positioned forces, even in the last few days, destroyers and fighter squadrons into the region to help Israel defend itself, to keep it from becoming a wider war, to keep it from escalating further.
It's not clear when the West will withdraw these troops, and they may say that this is for deterrence, but it's a double-edged sword, really. A provocation can lead to a major clash, given all the presence here, because their rivals, too, have military presence in the region. The biggest among them is, of course, Russia. Russia has around 6,000 troops in Syria. The Russian military is also said to be active in Libya. And this is what makes it a tinderbox, this concentration of firepower in one region. It's staggering. Plus, you have the regional players like Israel, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Iraq. And these deployments are not limited to land. The high seas are also being militarized, especially in the wake of the Gaza war. Every significant geopolitical player has a warship in the region now. The United States has 19 warships, 7 in the eastern Mediterranean and another 12 spread out across 3 areas, the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea and the Red Sea. The Red Sea in particular is crowded. Last year, when the Houthis began attacking ships, navies from around the world rushed to the region. This includes Russia, China, European nations like Germany, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, Greece and Belgium, and even Asian players like India and Sri Lanka. Until a few weeks back, India had some 10 warships deployed here. Now, all these countries are trying to protect their consignments from attacks, especially the oil supplies from West Asia. That's what they're trying to protect. So there's a substantial naval presence here. and a lot of volatility, with at least 45 armed conflicts on as we speak. This is what makes West Asia a potentially explosive region. The last thing they want is a war between Israel and Iran. As they say, fighting fire with fire will only leave you with ashes. We told you about the US bases. Now let's talk about the countries hosting them, the Arab nations of West Asia. When Iran launched its attack, one thing struck most observers. Jordan shot down the Iranian drones and missiles. Jordan, a Muslim Arab nation, took up arms to defend Israel. A country with a queen of Palestinian heritage defended Israel. Can you imagine the domestic headache this causes? Help very much.
Yesterday, we dealt with some flying objects that entered our airspace and were confronted to prevent them from endangering the safety of our citizens and populated residential areas. The debris fell in multiple areas during that time without causing any damage or injuries among citizens.
Jordan is doing its best to show that it was just protecting itself, not Israel. We'll soon see if their people buy this explanation, but Jordan is not the only Arab state that helped Israel. It's the only one that did it so publicly. A lot of others helped in secret. Reports say that Saudi Arabia and the UAE were also involved. They shared intelligence about the Iranian attack. And that's not all. Arab nations also opened their airspace, allowing Israel's British and American allies to defend it. The Arabs host Western air defense systems, surveillance and refueling aircraft as well. All of this would have been used in the defense of Israel. So most Arab nations did help protect Israel from Iran. But we should mention something else here. This was not some betrayal of the Iranians or the greater Muslim cause for that matter. It's nothing like that. Iran wanted the Arab countries to pass along this information to the US. Tehran likely wanted the attack to fail. As we mentioned yesterday, the attack was to save face, to put up a good show for the domestic audience. Iran doesn't want an all-out war with Israel. If it did, it would have attacked long ago. Iran had to react to the destruction of its embassy in Syria. They also had to make sure that they did not actually hurt Israel too much. And how do you ensure that? Telegraph your attack via Arab-backed channels. The plan seems to have worked. Iran can say it attacked. Israel did not really suffer any serious damage. The US can say they protected their ally, and the Arab countries, minus Jordan, can pretend that they're not involved. Everyone wins. Well, except the Iranian, Israeli and American taxpayers. They paid for the fireworks show after all. But then taxpayers always lose. Everyone else walks away with a victory. But how did it come to this? How are the Arab nations suddenly helping the Israelis, who until a few years ago were the ultimate enemy? It boils down to self-interest. Most of the Arab states are rich. Take Saudi Arabia and the UAE, for example. They make billions through oil. They already have giant buildings and sports cars on every other street. These countries want to spend their wealth on development or prepare for an oil-free future, like Saudi Arabia, which is building futuristic cities and buying entire sports. These rich Arab states do not want to be slowed down, especially because of a war between two of their former enemies. If a war breaks out, everything goes up in smoke. Arab airspace will be compromised regularly. Misfired weapons will damage their infrastructure. Their air bases will constantly be used by the US, making them targets. It will be almost impossible for the Arab nations to avoid getting sucked into this conflict, so they would rather just avoid the war altogether and focus on improving their nations. They've been trying to do this for years now. Take the UAE and Bahrain. These two countries recognized Israel back in 2020 after the US-led Abraham Accords. It took years of diplomacy to bring this about, to de-escalate the situation between Israel and the Arab nations. Saudi Arabia was widely expected to follow suit, but hopes for that were dashed last October with the Hamas attack and the following Israel-Hamas war. Now, an Israel-Iran war will be much worse. It will derail all the plans the rich Arab nations have laid out, which is why these countries will try and prevent a war at any cost. Now we turn our attention to the Sudan, the other country at war in the greater Arab region. The Sudan civil war hit the one-year mark today. It's been 1 year of carnage there. You have Sudan's army on one side and a paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces or RSF, on the other side. So it's a military junta versus warlord situation. And as you can imagine, civilians are bearing the brunt of this. 8.5 million Sudanese people have been displaced. It's the worst displacement crisis in the world right now. About 18 million people in the Sudan are facing food insecurity. 14 million children need humanitarian assistance, but it seems the world has forgotten them. Only waking up briefly on anniversaries like today before going back to ignoring the crisis. Here's our report.
All the countries of the world are busy with the rest of the world, but we are third world countries. No one is concerned about us. That is why we all suffered, honestly speaking.
That is the simple, grim assessment of the war in Sudan by a resident of Omdurman, the second most populous city in Sudan, a sister city to the capital, Khartoum. Both Khartoum and Omdurman mostly lie in ruins now, the result of 1 year of civil war. It started on the 15th of April 2023, when a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces attacked the government's military bases. Sudan was already under the rule of a military junta, led by this man, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. He styles himself as the chairman of Sudan's Transnational Sovereignty Council. Sounds much nicer than calling oneself a junta chief. Al-Burhan took control after a coup in late 2021. He was joined by this man, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who also goes by the name Hemedti. Hemedti is the deputy chairman of Sudan's Transitional Council, basically Al-Burhan's second-in-command. But last April, Hemedti tried to overthrow Al-Burhan. That's why the RSF, which reports to Hemedti, attacked Sudan's military bases. This power struggle between Al-Burhan and Hemedti has killed thousands and displaced millions. The death toll has crossed 15,000. About 33,000 people are injured. 8.6 million have been displaced. About 1.8 million people have fled to neighboring countries, mostly Chad, Egypt and South Sudan. The remaining 6.8 million are internally displaced, living on the streets or in refugee camps. 8.6 million displaced people. That's almost the entire population of Switzerland, more than double the population of Croatia. Sudan is facing the biggest displacement crisis in the world. More than a third of the country faces acute food insecurity. About 18 million people, almost 5 million of them are on the brink of famine. But almost no one has cared to try and save them. Before today, aid agencies had asked for $2.7 billion to try and help the people of Sudan. $2.7 billion from all international donors. How much did they end up getting? 6% of that. That's close to $160 million. About $10 for each person urgently in need of aid. But today, the world finally woke up. On the 1 year...
The bombing shook Britain and the world alike. An official inquiry was held. It concluded in March 2023. It said that the attack was avoidable. It could have been averted had the MI5 acted on vital intelligence. So the bombing was the result of an intelligence failure. Here's how. The atrocity was carried out by a 22-year-old named Salman Abedi. He was from Manchester but of Libyan descent. Abedi was a subject of interest to MI5 in 2014, but his case was closed because he was deemed to be low risk. Abedi returned from Libya 4 days before the blast. MI5 had this piece of information, but according to the inquiry, they didn't take it too seriously. Abedi used a homemade bomb to target the crowds. He stored it in a car in Manchester. Had the MI5 begun an investigation, they could have found the bomb. So there were missed opportunities here, and that had devastating consequences. Following the inquiry last year, the Security Services Director General Ken McCallum issued a public apology. McCallum said, "I am profoundly sorry that MI5 did not prevent the attack." But this did little to quell public anger. So about a year later, hundreds of bombing survivors, along with relatives of the victims, are taking the MI5 to court. This is believed to be the first time MI5 has been sued over its failure to stop a domestic terror attack. In fact, this is a rare case for the world. Intelligence agencies have been sued the world over, sometimes over allegations of spying, other times for defamation, but hardly ever for an intelligence failure. The Manchester bombing survivors and the families of the victims, though, say that their decision is justified. They argue that the MI5 is well funded and well equipped. They had information about Salman Abedi and they chose to ignore it and failed at their sole job. It cost people their lives. So now it's time that the MI5 pays the price.
Our next story is all kinds of bizarre. It's funny, it's confusing, but it's also cheating. On Sunday, China hosted the Beijing Half Marathon. Some 20,000 runners took part. They had to cover 21 kilometers. Up ahead, 4 runners were stuck together, one from China, 2 from Kenya, and 1 from Ethiopia. The African runners were slightly ahead, but in the final stretch, something strange happened. The African runners asked the Chinese runner to overtake them. You can see them wave him through. Take a look. How embarrassing is that? The eventual winner was He Zhe. He finished 1 second ahead of the African runners, but clearly it was all rigged. You see, He Zhe is quite the star in China. He's 25 years old. He won the marathon gold at the Asian Games. He also holds the national record, so making him win was a priority for the organizers. One of the runners from Kenya has spoken out about this. He admits letting He Zhe win. But guess why? Because he was his friend. As far as excuses go, not a good one. The cameras clearly picked up what happened here, and once it went on social media, there was outrage. People called it embarrassing and unfair, so the organizers had to do something. They've launched an investigation into what happened. But don't expect anything significant, because this is routine in China. Marathons are quite the craze there now. In 2023, around 170 Chinese cities hosted marathons, 170 Chinese cities. Some, like Beijing, hosted more than 10 races, and the participation was quite high. The Shanghai Marathon, for instance, has 170,000 pre-registrations. It tells you how popular these races are. But not all of them are fair. Like this one in Beijing, it was sponsored by a Chinese sports company called X-Step. And guess which runner they also sponsor? He Zhe, the same runner who got the free overtake. So try joining the dots now. Chances are the sponsors wanted their man to win, but why did the African runners play along? A Chinese sports expert has a possible explanation. Maybe the prize money was guaranteed, or maybe a bonus was promised if they let the Chinese runner win. Either way, it's not done. And this whole controversy exposes 2 problems. One, the state of China's marathons. It's pretty bad. In 2018, 258 runners cheated in the Shenzhen race. Many of them took shortcuts. Another incident was in 2019. Instead of running, a woman decided to ride her bike. She was caught on camera and asked to dismount. So clearly, China needs more oversight. And that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is the frequency of such incidents. They signal an attitude problem, a desire to win by bending rules. We've seen that at the highest levels in China. At the 2012 Olympics, 8 badminton players were disqualified. 2 of them were Chinese. They threw a match in the group stages. The idea was to get an easier opponent in the knockouts. Another example is Sun Yang. He was a world and Olympic champion in swimming, but he was later banned by authorities. Do you know why? Because in 2018, he destroyed vials with his blood samples. It's not something that innocent people do. In 2019, there was another example. China was hosting the World Military Games. One of the events was orienteering. It's like a mix between sprinting and treasure hunting. You must follow clues and maps to reach checkpoints. Just one problem. The Chinese onlookers helped their runners. They planted clues across the route. So eventually other countries complained about it. Last year at the Asian Games, similar complaints were raised. Some Indian athletes were unhappy with the officiating. They lodged a complaint with the organizers. So clearly there's a trend here. It's easy to blame it on the athletes, to call them dishonest, but it's also a symptom of the wider problem. Athletes who win are celebrated in China, but athletes who lose are ridiculed, trolled and worse. Now, we're not saying that it's an excuse to cheat, but I'm sure it does not help. Chinese organizers and authorities need to realize the most important thing about sport. Winning is important, yes, but winning the right way is important. Well, that's China for you, trying to win at any cost. So cheating is perhaps par for the course. But what happens when China falls behind? When someone else tries to pull ahead? They can be unpleasant, even racist. Let me show you how. China has launched into a tirade against India, and it's not their first one. In the past, they've called Indian men clowns. More recently, they've mocked the iPhones made in India. They say those phones smell of curry. The latest attack comes from the Global Times. It is in the form of a video. Now, Global Times does not like the fact that Tesla wants to enter the Indian market. Some context here. India is trying to attract global EV makers. Last month, New Delhi announced some concessions for them. Import tax on EVs was slashed from 100% to 15%. And Tesla pounced on the opportunity. Its founder, Elon Musk, has planned a trip to India. He has an appointment with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This meeting could take place later this month, and they could formally announce Tesla's foray into India. In fact, Tesla executives are already scouting for showroom spaces in Delhi and Mumbai, according to reports. All of this seems to have upset the Global Times. Well, they don't manufacture cars, they make propaganda, so that's what they're doing now, throwing all kinds of dirt at this project. Their video has some unsolicited advice / warnings for Tesla. It says Tesla won't be able to make cars, quote unquote, efficiently and effectively in India. Plus, India has no supply chains for EVs. There is poor infrastructure, there is corruption, bureaucracy is a problem, the business environment is negative, and so on and so forth. And to underscore these points further, the video features images of chaotic Indian streets, poor roads and underdeveloped rural areas. So the intention here is quite clear. Portray India as too backward for Tesla's advanced EVs. The Global Times says India is, and I'm quoting, immature and underdeveloped for Tesla and its EVs. In the same breath, they also claim that Tesla would be better served in China. In fact, I have some more quotes for you. So Elon Musk, we have to say very good luck to you. If you attempt to do this in India, I think you're going to need it. China has better infrastructure, China has better supply chains, so China already has an extensive spread of charging stations. It goes on and on. A long rant making a short point. China is better, make Teslas here. Why doesn't the Global Times give this advice to Chinese companies, the ones who want to make their cars in India? Like BYD, a Chinese EV maker, the world's biggest seller of EVs. BYD is launching its cars in India. They entered India 2 years back. They already have 24 dealerships in India, and they hope to capture 90% of India's EV market. The Global Times should school them first on India's roads and supply chains, because BYD wants to compete in the same space as Tesla, the high-end premium segment. If India is such a hopeless market, how is BYD expanding at such a rapid pace here? But then again, we're talking about the Global Times. Perhaps they don't understand fact-checking. Tesla's India project is a business decision. It is not a geopolitical move. Tesla sales are down across the world. It faces stiff competition from Chinese players. Just today, Tesla sacked 10% of its workforce. So they're cutting costs. They want to sell more cars. And for that, they will have to enter new markets like India, where there is still room for growth. Tesla cannot rely on China, where EV sales are declining. In January this year, sales were down by 39%, and this trend is expected to continue. Plus, the Chinese economy is in a bad shape, so the big picture there looks gloomy. India offers a sharp contrast with opportunities for growth. The Global Times needs to be in tune with the times.
Amir Sarfaraz Tamba, the man who killed Sarabjit Singh, an Indian who was killed by unknown gunmen in Islampura, Punjab. So that's the update that is coming in, that Amir Sarfaraz Tamba is the man who killed Sarabjit Singh, who was an Indian lodged in the Pakistan jail. Now we're learning that Sarabjit Singh's killer has also been now gunned down in Islampura in Punjab. And Tamba is apparently a close associate of Hafiz Saeed, is what we're learning. So that's the big update that is coming in from Pakistan, where Sarabjit Singh's killer has been gunned down in Pakistan's Punjab. And Amir Sarfaraz Tamba is the man who was behind the killing of Sarabjit Singh, who was an Indian national lodged in Pakistan's jail. And now we're learning that the killer has been gunned down in Islampura in Punjab. So that's the big update that is coming in from Pakistan. Now we're also learning that this man, Tamba, is apparently a close associate of Hafiz Saeed. And in fact, Tamba was released just 2 years back from the jail, and he was staying in a very well protected area with multiple CCTV in the locality. But despite that, he has been gunned down in Pakistan's Punjab. Amir Sarfaraz Tamba is the name of the man who killed Sarabjit Singh, who was an Indian national who was lodged in Pakistan's jail, and Sarabjit Singh was attacked with bricks and iron.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Georgia, lawmakers brawl inside the parliament over a controversial bill. North Korea marks the 112th birth anniversary of the state's founder, Kim Il-sung. In California, stranded sea otter pups are paired with surrogate moms. And finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1912, the Titanic sank into the depths of the North Atlantic Ocean. After it struck an iceberg, more than 1,500 lost their lives. At the time, the supposedly unsinkable vessel was the largest and most luxurious ship in the world, and after 112 years, it continues to captivate people's imagination. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
뜻깊은 사울이념 대체롭게 장식한 청년들의 양에는 경애하는 아버지 길
Amir Sarfaraz Tamba, the man who killed Sarabjit Singh, an Indian who was killed by unknown gunmen in Islampura, Punjab. So that's the update that is coming in, that Amir Sarfaraz Tamba is the man who killed Sarabjit Singh, who was an Indian lodged in the Pakistan jail. Now we're learning that Sarabjit Singh's killer has also been now gunned down in Islampura in Punjab, and Tamba is apparently a close associate of Hafiz Saeed, is what we're learning. So that's the big update that is coming in from Pakistan, where Sarabjit Singh's killer has been gunned down in Pakistan's Punjab. And Amir Sarfaraz Tamba is the man who was behind the killing of Sarabjit Singh, who was an Indian national lodged in Pakistan's jail. And now we're learning that the killer has been gunned down in Islampura in Punjab. So that's the big update that is coming in from Pakistan. Now we're also learning that this man, Tamba, is apparently a close associate of Hafiz Saeed. And in fact, Tamba was released just 2 years back from the jail, and he was staying in a very well protected area with multiple CCTV in the locality. But despite that, he has been gunned down in Pakistan's Punjab. Amir Sarfaraz Tamba is the name of the man who killed Sarabjit Singh, who was an Indian national who was lodged in Pakistan's jail and was killed while being in Pakistan's jail in 2013. Sarabjit Singh was attacked with bricks and iron rods by a group of inmates in Lahore, and now we're learning that the killer of Sarabjit Singh has been gunned down in Pakistan. CNN News 18's Abhishek Jha is now joining us with more details on this. Abhishek, what more details do you have on this particular piece of breaking news?
Well, we know that this person, Tamba, who was also responsible for the killing of Sarabjit Singh in Pakistan's Kotlakpat jail, and on the charges of killing, he was also served. He also served some years of punishment, but then he was later bailed out and he was roaming scot-free. And since for a very long time he has been a criminal and he had a criminal background. The interesting part is that he was killed by two bike-borne assailants, and that happened at a place which was much secured, an area which had buildings and offices of senior police officials and administrators in Lahore.
नमस्कार। आपको नवरात्रि की बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं, और कुछ ही दिनों में देश रामनवमी का पर्व मनाएगा। रामनवमी की बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं।
आपको भी। मेरा पहला सवाल होगा ये कि आपने कई भाषणों में कहा है कि 2024 आपका लक्ष्य नहीं है, 2047 है। तो 2047 तक